Hello, breathing teeth and Argentine beef, and welcome to the next chapter in the history of corrupted cover art. On this program, we explore the cover artwork used throughout a band's discography and interpret it to the fullest extent of our power, which, as I will shortly demonstrate, is very limited and oftentimes abused. The target of tonight's assessment is none other than Seattle's finest, Bell Witch. Not to imply that Seattle's finest is a particularly high bar, but still, despite being a relatively young band, Bell Witch has marched their procession to the forefront of funeral doom, and they already stand just as prominently as our old-fashioned funereal friends like Mournful Congregation and Thergothan. The soundscape they construct is massive, and so far the band hasn't failed to pair their music with equally disheartening and oftentimes spine-tingling artwork. If you possess the strength to persevere through trauma, loss, and bone-chilling characters resembling a blanket draped over an armchair, then let's lay our weeping eyes upon Bell Witch's self-titled demo. Back when Bell Witch were merely mournful babies, weeping to themselves with a tremorous boo-hoo gaga in the since-forgotten year of 2011, they slid onto the scene with a 4-song demo to demonstrate their melancholic might. 2 of these tracks would later appear on the debut album in 2012, but another 2 are exclusive to the demo, and they alone make it a worthwhile listen, especially given that the band has so few releases. In the center of the artwork, we see a scarcely detailed figure that appears to be female. Her gender is evidenced by the fact that it fits my narrative, and I would prefer it if nobody contradicted me. You see, this woman is clad in her Sunday's finest, a black cloak that drapes down the length of her body and envelops the massive eyeball that hopefully isn't attached to her foot, but given the circumstances, I'd say she's pulling it off. She looks good. She looks beautiful, a word that traces all the way back to the Latin adjective bella, the roots of which brings us right back to the band name and, maybe not so coincidentally, the demo title itself, Bell Witch. The beautiful witch, maybe not the belle of the ball, because I can't imagine that ballroom dancing to funeral doom would be a rewarding experience, but nevertheless, the band seemingly wants us to appreciate this figure in spite of all her quirks. Maybe she does have an enormous eyeball growing out of the bottom of her feet, and maybe her face is devoid of any human characteristics. But that doesn't stop her from working with what she has and emerging from an abstract coil of squiggles with a flashy cloak and a devil-may-care attitude. It's her acceptance of her own quirks, no matter how revolting and vomit-inducing they may be, that makes her beautiful. What an inspiring message for such a depressing band. But don't worry, it gets worse. Take, for example, Bell Witch's debut album, and my personal favorite release of theirs, Longing. Though the band name stayed the same, there is nothing beautiful here. Even the moon looks like it has some kind of iron deficiency. But don't let that distract you from the real subject of this piece, the ghost of the gray blanket. This ghost, like all ghosts before him, is completely invisible. However, as the album title suggests, he still has a longing to be a part of the human world, the tangible world, no matter what the cost may be. So, even though it means appearing frightful or ghastly, the ghost has draped himself in a blanket, giving him a traditional ghostly appearance for all the world to behold. However, look at the size of this blanket relative to the house. This is a comically large blanket, a comically long blanket, you could say, and it's so large and bulky that the ghost cannot enter its childhood home while he's wearing it. Just look at his towering height compared to that feeble little door frame. He's trapped in a permanent state of longing. He wants to be a part of the human world, but he also wants to be home. And when one desire is satisfied, the other is rendered impossible. His days of babing it up like Babe Mania are long behind him unless he can get his grubby little hands on some cash. But that's out of my hands. Let's leave the ghost of the gray blanket to his wretched little limbo, and proceed to Bell Witch's next album, For Phantoms, made by Phantoms, for Phantoms. This is some tantalizing artwork, but there's an awful lot to process here, so let's begin with the album title. A phantom could be any number of things. It could be a ghoul, a ghost, a specter, a spirit. Who knows what the band meant? Well, you're looking at him. Assuming you were looking at the screen when I said that. Just to clarify, I meant myself. I know what it means. You see, phantom can be defined as a ghost, but it also refers to, and I quote, denoting a financial arrangement or transaction that has been invented for fraudulent purposes, but that does not really exist. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that we're dealing with some classic, old-fashioned salt-of-the-earth insurance fraud. The cover art depicts some kind of deluge, a massive flood that is in the process of destroying a vast array of property. All of these caskets were sent cascading down into the void, and who knows? Maybe they were all filled with priceless gems. That's what the documents say, and now that all the caskets have been swept away in a freak accident, I guess you can't prove otherwise, can you, Mr. Taxman? Going off the title, there are 4 instances of phantom fraud here, and conveniently, the artwork is divided into 4 sections. There is, of course, the loss of the precious gems that surely were tightly packed inside these coffins. There's the destruction of the irreplaceable wildlife in the nearby forest. There's the decimation of the artisan-crafted tombstones that littered the cemetery, and most damning of all, the sweeping river that got all of the skeletons wet, even though they specifically signed documentation that stated that they did not want their skeletons to get wet. Do you people have any idea how much money is at stake with a stunt like this? Though it certainly raises the question, who benefits here? It brings me no joy to incriminate a soul that has suffered so much already, but I'm afraid all signs point to the ghost in the gray blanket. Under current United States law, and do remember that Bell Witch is an American band, ghosts are not allowed to work. Therefore, ghosts cannot legally make money. And without money, how is this sorry spirit supposed to purchase a better-fitting blanket so that he can get into the house that he loves so dearly? Further reducing his chances of exculpation, we can refer to the house itself. For some reason, someone decided to equip this house with a raised foundation. It could be an aesthetic choice, sure, but it also conveniently protects the house from any major flooding. Kind of a curious inclusion for an area with no history of flooding until this mysterious event, don't you think? Listen, the ghost in the gray blanket is a sweetheart, tried and true, but I can't let him get away with this. I'll let the boys in blue take care of the ghost in gray and continue on my merry way to Mirror Reaper. This is the band's 3rd and most recent album, which gained notoriety for spanning 2 entire 12-inch records with just 1 song. Bold, ambitious, obnoxious, all of these terms come to mind, and although I personally think the album could have improved with some distinct tracks, Mirror Reaper is nonetheless an impressive achievement that any well-behaved Funeral Doom fan would do well to check out. But enough about music, we're here to talk about ghosts. Notice first that the tombstones scattered across the floor here are strikingly similar to those seen on the cover for 4 Phantoms. Not only that, but they're placed directly in front of this massive authority figure, almost as if they were being presented as evidence to a judge. This figure has his entire face obscured by some kind of cloth, perhaps a reference to the fact that justice is blind. Also, perhaps a reference to the fact that this judge is really stupid because he's not even looking at the evidence right in front of him. There's no way for this impartial authority to determine whether or not the tombstones were destroyed by natural means or by the hands of some sinister schemer. In sooth, I don't see any way that the ghost in gray could possibly lose this case, and it seems that all my efforts to incriminate him were in vain. And he, too, seems to be confident that I'll win the case. If we zoom in on him, we can see that he's already rocking a fresh new fit. He's gone ahead and taken out a loan so that he can purchase a blanket that snugly fits his spiritual form. As soon as the judge makes his decision and lets the ghost in gray go, all will be well, and the age of longing will have come to a bittersweet end. Perhaps this judge isn't as naive as he presents himself to be. Remember that the album is titled Mirror Reaper, and a mirror is exactly what the judge is holding. He's angling it in just the right way that if he were to take a little peek beneath his face cloth, he'd see all the evidence laid before him clear as day. That's where the reaping part comes in, I suppose. The judge lures criminals into a false sense of security only to prove their guilt with their own carelessness. You know, I've been meaning to make this Bell Witch video for a long time now, and truth be told, I always envisioned that it would end right here, right after Mirror Reaper. But in the time that it's taken for this video to come to fruition, they've already pumped out a brand new release, a collaboration with the talented Eric Mahogany and his project Aerial Ruin. Eric has been involved in every Bell Witch album to date, and it is my understanding that he provides the clean vocals as well as guitar, most memorably on Longing's Rows of Endless Waves. So this project ended up being more or less Bell Witch focusing in on those types of songs for an entire release. Very cool concept, and might I add, with very satisfying results. Ah, but what of the cover art? At first I thought that the skull in the center was wearing a gorgeous astronaut helmet and drifting aimlessly over the ocean. That's a fun little thought, but let's get serious. Bell Witch is a funeral doom band after all. Once again, we see before us a callback to the Four Phantoms, specifically a further segment of the river that the coffins were carried down during the massive flood. Remember, the river is where the skeletons who specifically wanted to remain dry became wet and had their entire dignities stripped of them in a shameful act of desecration. This skull, then, symbolically floating in an impenetrable bubble of wetness, represents the anguish, the fury, the discomfort that these wet skeletons will be forced to endure until the end of time. Skulls are not known for their expressiveness, though some of us try harder than others, so it's difficult to determine the skull's intentions. Do the tortured souls of the wet-boned brethren want revenge on the ghost in the gray blanket? Or do they simply want to attract the attention of a passerby so that they can recover their bones from the water and dry them off? It's hard to say, and I suppose it would be futile either way. Though it was just one album, it seems that the word longing sums up the entire Bell Witch mythos in one word. On that note, this video is getting pretty longing itself, so here I will leave you on waves far from shore. We'll see how you like it when your bones are no longer dry. Peace out, babies and gentlemen.